Well, I don't know how that jives with Mr. Chapman, what you're saying, how they're going to let this thing down easy. When I look at it, you're trying to balance this giant elephant on a thimble. To me, it doesn't seem like you can drop this thing down very easily. It seems like when it does happen, whatever the triggering event is, it's going to be sudden and it's going to be rapid and it's going to be quick.
Bob.
And it will happen when they want it to happen.
That was exactly what I was going to say, because so far what we've had is exactly what they've been. They've lost this term in their vocabulary now in their stories, but we've had relatively a soft landing. If they would have let all these banks go belly up because of their greed and their stupidity, yeah, it would have been real tough for the country for a shorter duration of time. But the situation would have corrected itself. All the stuff would have been vetted out. The crooks and the criminals, they would have ended up with their dirty little books, their second set of books. And some people would have went to jail. Some people would have been covered up. But this whole thing, rather than this soft landing, this elongated, drawn-out collapse, is what they're banking on. And you're exactly right, Mr. Chapman. It's when they decide to pull the plug. And they will do that. But you're already seeing your soft landing now, my friend. You're already seeing it. Well, and they did it by what, Robbie? Well, how many trillions of dollars did they vote out of the public largesse?
Yeah, but nobody questions, obviously, we've gone over this, who's buying U.S. debt. And if you want to believe the Federal Reserve, U.S. consumers are buying the debt. I mean,
which is preposterous.
Completely preposterous. But nobody, not one single. Rick Santelli.
Wait a minute. Wait
a minute. Maybe Santelli will step out and say something, but he's an oddity like we are. They are all afraid of their jobs. The economists and the analysts and the academics, they work for somebody else, and they'll get fired out of their job like they came out of a cannon if they open the can of worms.
And if you watch how their cohorts treat Santelli, they never know what's going to come out of the guy's mouth, and you can see this tight-lipped grimace kind of trying to smile when the guy speaks because they don't know what he's going to say. Hang on, everybody. We'll be right back. Bob, I've been looking at assets. Bloomberg says there's international demand for U.S. assets. It actually rose in November.
Yeah, but last week, and I thought it would be a bigger story than it was, he got the CEO of Trim Tabs, whose sole job is to track purchases of bonds. And he couldn't explain who was buying the bonds. He eliminated all the usual suspects. He says it wasn't foreigners. It was, and he was completely befuddled by the Federal Reserve's figure that it was, what do they call it, Bob? Consumer? No, they don't call it consumer. Domestic purchases or something crazy.
Well, the part of the story says foreign purchases of Treasury notes and bonds were $118.3 billion in November, compared with purchases of $38.9 billion in October. Private investors bought a record $87.1 billion in Treasury securities.
But still, the numbers don't match up to what they put out on auction.
They don't.
By a large margin.
Bob?
Bob knows this.
The Fed is lying. I mean, it's so obvious. It is not even worth a discussion. And any person who is in Wall Street or in government in that area who accepts those figures has got to have a damaged mind.
Well, and there are, and Bob...
Look, John, 80% of treasuries and agency paper last year was bought by the Fed. And they also bought close to $900 billion worth of toxic waste, and they're not finished yet, and they're going to keep right on buying it. And the whole thing is a Ponzi scheme. It's monetization. The British are doing the same thing. You saw their inflation figures, 2.9% today. The figures, depending upon you, whether you use U or W, in the United States are around 3%. Real inflation is somewhere in the vicinity of 7 to 8%, and it's going to get worse. Why? Because of monetization. Even though they cut back on what used to be M3 from some 17 to 18% to around 6%. The game is on, and they are not going to stop monetizing because they can't. And interest rates are not going up. J.P. Morgan Chase said yesterday, maybe 2 years from now. The Fed earlier said, well, maybe in July or something like that. But the market will raise rates on its own, probably on the 10-year U.S. Treasury note from, say, 3.70 to 5%. That is a good possibility during the course of this year. And, of course, if that happens, that also means that mortgage rates would go to 6.25% to 0.5%.
They're damned if they do and damned if they don't.
They're in a box and they can't get out.
Man, oh man, oh man.
And they deserve it. They pulled this hundreds of times over the centuries. And now we have communication with the Internet and with talk shows like this one. And the people throughout the world are finding out what's going on. And they're not very happy about it. And, of course, the Illuminists know this. And that's why they've had to expedite their program and find the place where they want to pull the plug and suppress all the people of the world with their mercenaries. And that's what's going on right now. And that's why you see the expedited process in the administration and in England in the administration and so on and so forth, because they know if they don't do this right, they're all going to end up dead.
Well, I was driving down the road today, and I was looking. Round Rock, Texas has become, years ago, there was this big gap between Austin and surrounding cities. Now it looks like they're all a suburb of Austin by way of interstate or tollway. And I'm driving down the road, and I'm looking at all these corporate signs hanging around. And I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking to myself, why is it that in this country that we feel that we have to keep producing and replacing the old with the new and improved and brand new? I was thinking more or less along the lines of the housing situation, where there's millions and millions and millions of homes established, built, sitting there on the market, just collecting dust. And we have this penchant for making brand new areas that people of lesser income can move into. And then there's the real estate developers, along with the cities and everything else, that, we're going to build new tract homes. And what happens? It's the old homes that the tract house builders built 5, 10, 15 years ago that are new and upcoming slums for the lower income people. I've never had anybody specifically address and satisfy my curiosity about this. Why must this be done? Why is it? Is this corporate driven, Bob, that it's the new and improved and brand new and this and that and the other, and we're going to keep building for profit's sake and build and build and build? They've built themselves out of a housing market in this country. I mean,
and many other things, as a matter of fact. And yes, it is. You might call it a spiritual thing, and has been in America for a long time. Other countries in history have experienced the same thing: better, better, better. And along the way, they lose their way. They get deeply in debt, and they go bankrupt, and they have wars, and lots of people die.
The corporate bottom line, the profit margin, and I don't care if you're producing tanks or warships or you're producing widgets or building homes or whatever it is, big turnover in inventory. We got to keep building and we got to keep producing and producing, and it's just this, Bob. I don't even know how to adequately explain how frustrating this is to build.
John, just look at this. If you take all of the inventory of residential properties that the banks are hiding, and you put it all together, it's about $14 months inventory. How can any builder of sane mind be building new homes when you have that kind of an inventory overhang? I mean, you've got to be disconnected from reality.
Well,
and that's why we have been and are still short, in spite of the subsidies and everything else, in the housing industry, housing stocks. And we're going to stay there because this is going to get worse, not better.
Well, but the whole dynamic of consumers and how they've been buying and what's been marketed to them within our lifetime, gentlemen, has completely changed. I mean, they figured out that, oh, wait a minute, we're going to have a lot of people coming home, a lot of guys that survived World War II, and Rosie the Riveter, she's earned her money, and, well, we've got this pent-up demand, and